Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello, and welcome again to another episode of Harvesting Wisdom. Today, my guest is Joaquim Sebastian. Joaquim is becoming a friend, although he lives on the other side of the planet in Malaysia. And he's working with us on several different projects. Joaquim is a visionary founder of Everpeaks, which is a company that specializes in e-commerce innovation. Joaquim led Everpeaks in significant milestone launches of fulfillment and represents a solution in duty-free integrated warehousing and fulfillment services, and it's designed to revolutionize manufacturing to consumer globally, empowers brands. That's a big thing, is the branding work that's done. That's very specialized branding work, bypassing traditionally the intermediaries. Under Joaquim's guidance, Everpeak aims to redefine the e-commerce landscape. The company offers cutting-edge solutions, unlocking new opportunities for businesses in digital marketplace. Joaquim is committed in innovation to driving positive change in e-commerce through Everpeaks. So we kind of cover all of that. That means something to some people, and for others that it's a different language, right? You have a background, actually, if I remember, in biology originally.
Biomedical science.
Biomedical, right? And so just tell me about your journey a little bit. You were in a band, so you probably had hair down to your butt and, all kinds of
I
earrings and
wish, I
stuff.
wish.
But tell me about
I
that journey.
strongly, if I try to, yeah, definitely. If I try to grow my hair long, it just puffs up into an afro. So,
Oh, I would do that in a
wouldn't
heartbeat if I
it
could.
doesn't go.
Yeah.
It goes
You,
up. It goes up.
oh, I love it. I'd
So
do
yeah,
that in a heartbeat.
11 years in my entrepreneurial journey so far. It's been a pretty amazing journey, meeting all sorts of different structures and people across the world. So currently, what I am is a digital ecosystem specialist. I help brands craft their digital strategy across content, sales, positioning, branding, tools, technology, as well as run the operations to achieve those goals for brands. That's what we really do in Everpeaks. Fulfillment, warehousing, marketplace strategies, all these are components of said digital strategy. But in the end, it requires a holistic point of view to understand what you should do, what you're wasting time with, and what is the opportunity available at any given time, respective to the niche that you operate in. So different categories or niches require different things, right? And as you said, I started off in biomedical science more than 15 years ago, where graduated, and I did have a stint in music. I was part of a band called Halfway Kings, and you can search for us on Spotify. We play an angry mix of acoustic, blues, jazz music, and I quit that band because it didn't put food on the table, and that till today remains one of the pain points that drive me in working with impact-based companies. So impact-based companies are defined by companies that either create social-cultural impact, such as Salt, Seed, and Water, Fishnure, who perpetuate the or push forward an organic and sustainable approach in plant nutrition, but also craft-based businesses that have a very specialized heritage technique and oftentimes lack the capability to scale their structures. So that's what I choose to work with at this point in time.
Right. So we met because you were working with Jim, who's a pioneer unto himself in North Carolina, I believe, right? And
That's right, Charlotte.
Jim's done so many different things. He's got patents, and he's been in textiles, and he was a farmer at one point, and he's done lots and lots of stuff in his career. And he found you,
Hmm.
or you found him. I'm not
Mm.
sure how that worked, but and which is a unique deal because you're out in Malaysia, but your specialty is something that a lot of people don't have, and it's difficult to find, right? So he had the content of what he was doing, and like you said, it's an impact brand. He uses a fish manure, which
Hmm.
is just an amazing thing unto itself. But he uses that, and then he's got some other ingredients he puts together, some clay and some carbon and that kind of thing, and creates a really pretty cool product. And it's a microbial based product, and it works really
Hmm.
good with a lot of other amendments and with soil to kind of activate and get things started. But you started with him a couple years ago, and tell me about how you started that first, because you talk about building brand and getting it on to Amazon and to Walmart and things like that, and there's a lot of hoops involved. So just walk me through that process that you've followed.
Yeah. Well, the first amazing thing that occurred was Jim found me, and I'm all the way in Malaysia, right? And this lays quite a bit of groundwork or understanding to the man that we're talking about, Jim. He's not a young guy, right? Let's face it. He's pretty
Nice. In his
um,
90s.
in his 90s. He's in his 90s, yet he's far more technologically savvy than a lot of young guys that I know my age, right? I'm 37 this year, and that he could find me halfway around the world to solve a problem that he had, which was to operate his Amazon business and to scale it. He was looking for a service provider or a freelancer. And because as Everpeaks, we use freelancer.com and a few other platforms as a lead generation tool. That's where he found me. And when we were discussing the scope, I did propose and address his issues that he wanted, and it was done pretty quickly because, again, we're very familiar with the ecosystem. Me being a brand owner myself and providing that service to other brand owners. So once we solve the issue, then it's no longer about the compliance and structural issues that he had, but about how do you want to grow the business. And we had a conversation on what that would cost. And I told him, like, look, this is a 200,000 USD proposition if you want to pay someone to get it done, like full on across the number of years and what you're looking to do, like build the websites, build the strategy, run the op. And I said, look, let's figure out a different way of how we're going to work together. Let's put on performance based targets. Let's hit those targets. And when we reach those targets, let's partner up. And essentially, we hit those targets within 6 months, more than, I believe, more than 8x growth within the first year from what his revenue points were before I got involved. So again, very specialized field. And when we got in, we restructured the product strategy, we restructured the content, we built the site the correct way, and a lot of the successful parameters of how you build an e-commerce business with the strategy behind it, and that was the core. Because what you see in the market today is that there are a lot of specialists who are vertical specialists. They're good at one platform, they're really good at what they do, but they're not going to give you the right kind of advice on what your business needs to use when you want to save money, keep it efficient, and keep it operating at minimal operating costs. Because these platforms cost a lot of money if you want to run them. And that was the approach that we took. We look at it holistically. We decide how do we get the best amount of revenue, extract the best amount of value at the most profitable rate. So that's sustainable for the business, right? And at that point in time until now, I think we've grown another 100% as well year on year. So it's doing very well. And, we're really excited about our future partnerships is going to, which is really going to scale it even further, especially what we're doing with soil, seed, and water.
Right. So yeah, we for those listening, we now are manufacturing the product. Jim's got the formula and the actual
Hmm.
ingredients, and then we just manufacture it with our facilities, which are set up pretty well to do that, and then we bag it
Yeah.
and take care of your fulfillment. The uh, Going back before that, though, you got started on this. If I remember right, you were doing printing or decals or something, and then you've also
Hmm.
worked in the space. You've got like a really unique. There was another business that did pottery,
The
extremely
ceramic
artistic.
pottery, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for my gift. I haven't received any of that pottery, but it's cool looking stuff. But you know, anyway, tell me
It's on
about
its way.
that
It's
because
on its way.
yeah, that was kind of the beginning for you because you kind of somewhat self-taught, and now you're at a point where
Hmm.
you've got a whole team. You've got guys who are very good at specific segments, and then on top of that, you have a variety of other consultants or specialists that you use to do all the things you do. So it's a good network that you've created and a good platform you created. So walk through that a little bit, and then we can move on to the discussing some of the new stuff that's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So, my first business was a decal-based business. So we made automotive decals for superbikes, and that business was one of the few. Well, I'll be honest. I got lucky in that business in terms of the core strategic structures that were in place because of the nature of the business. When you see decals, a lot of people think just itty bitty things that you stick on books and it's just for fun. But what we were doing were automotive grade decals and wall decals that were decorative in nature. And the key thing about decals was we were producing it on demand. So we managed to create a huge catalog of virtual products, and when they get sold, that's when we make them and we ship them. And we were doing 60 to 80 sets a day. At highest point, we were making about almost $1 million worth of stickers. So it was a pretty decent business, and we had distribution to more than 40, 50 countries that we sold into, predominantly the US, but we had Germany, United Kingdom, we had Australia, and all the relevant European countries as well. So that structure was the first brand that I owned. And on top of that, we expanded the range by coming up with an agreement with Warner Brothers. So we licensed Batman, we licensed Superman, we licensed all these superhero stickers, about 30 different IPs under Warner Brothers, and we expanded our wall decal range through pre-pandemic times, right? And that was another business model that we were really pushing, much like Fatheads stickers from the US. So quite a similar concept.
Okay.
However, the pandemic really hit us badly, and we kind of are still in recovery mode since then because it was a manufacturing based business. But before those things happened, I myself was looking out for more newer opportunities, and the agency model is not the sexiest model because once a company is done with you, if they fire you, you're gonna lose years of work and things like that, and sometimes those things are not within your control. Companies have different perceptions on what is valuable to them, and once you build the asset for them, sometimes they think they can run it by themselves, and then you get terminated, and then they take over, and then most of the time they screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened with us for a few sessions. So what I did was to re-strategize the position of Everpeaks in the market, where we now look to become a venture builder mode, where I invest in companies and take a portion of it by investing workload and marketing dollars for especially small companies, and grow them beyond what they can do by themselves. And the pottery business was a core example of that, where you know back to the story of how I was a creative in my early days. That pain point is still there. Like I struggle, and I really find it a very difficult thing to accept that creative businesses or creative entrepreneurs, especially those in the craft business, they can't survive with their skill set. So I met this potter who's in a rural part of Malaysia, and he was making amazing work. He has 20 years of experience in a very specialized kind of pottery called raku pottery. And I decided to work with him and see where this business can go. He was probably making about 10,000 US dollars a year in sales before I got involved. And within 3 years of working with him, actually within 2 years, last year actually we hit about 300,000 US dollars per year in sales, export sales. So
Okay.
growing businesses like that, it requires not just digital expertise, not just ecosystem structural strategic work. It also requires entrepreneurial support where you got to teach the guy how to run a company, right? Those are things that you don't find those things in the book. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, you've got to be there to do it with him. So that is also something that I'm very passionate about, and it's very rewarding for me at this journey or this point in my life to be able to contribute back, and hence why the selection of companies that I choose to work with, whether in agency model or with a investment partner model, it's going to be impact companies, and
Yeah.
that's where
And
we
that
are now.
and pottery really goes back to the beginning of time for men, right? On the planet of men and
Yeah.
women, humans. It's really a very basic thing. We need to be able to capture juices and fruits and vegetables and whatever in some kind of
Mm-hmm.
device, and we also grow plants out of it and things like that. And it's really a revered thing in a lot of parts of the world. Bonsai, for instance, in China and
Mm-hmm.
Japan and Asia. The pot itself is part of and an important part of the entire uh, product, right? So you have the plant that
It's like a
you
living
know,
sculpture, right? Yeah, it's a
it
part of
really
that.
is.
Yeah.
But some of those potteries in Japan, some of the things they put them in are hundreds, or I don't even know if they hit maybe 1,000 years old, and they're worth. I've seen some over there when I was in Japan that were, worth $1 million. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
a cool business, and I saw the stuff he had. But let's move on to something you just brought up. Well, let's talk a little then about our new partnership with Soil Seed and Water. Um, we are taking all of our brands, and we're in multiple industries. So we're in landscape, we're in uh, home gardens and school gardens, and we sell to farmers, we sell to distributors, we sell to nurseries and to the golf industry. So we have, I guess, different segments that we are reaching, and we have right now, I think there's 27 products, and we've got four or five new products coming online. Plus, we're developing a co-branded product with you guys at Fishnure
The Fishnure.
that takes the Fishnure into account for another four products right off the bat, and probably more down
Mm-hmm.
the road. And we believe in these products, and some of them are pretty specialized, but they have. If you're a gardener or a landscaper or a nurseryman at a commercial scale, and or even a homeowner, and you want products that are very effective, they're organic, they're safe, but they're good for the environment and they work. If whether or not
Mm-hmm.
it's a product for an avocado tree or for vegetables, or whether it's whatever it might be for turf. So we work with you on that, and we're in that process of doing the same thing you did with Jim. Um, but it's a difficult process from my standpoint, because you're asking. I know a lot about my industry, my business, and things I'm doing, but this is kind of a new thing. So we've talk about the hoops we've already just gone through, and what we have in store
Mm-hmm.
over these next couple of months. So talk about that a little bit, and then I am going to ask the second follow-up question, because you did mention COVID. So marketing
Mm-hmm.
to consumers before COVID, during COVID, after COVID. We're talking about a 5-year period, which is might as well be a million year period, right? I mean, there's so much that has happened, right? That it's
Yeah.
hard to digest. So, but let's talk about just take us through what we're currently undergoing to get our products online with you? Because, so walk through that a little bit.
Yeah. So again, the approach that I take in developing I say, a digital strategy is first fundamentals, and this is where a lot of times not set up correctly, you will fail in the digital world because your margin structures are not done correctly. You're not aware of certain hidden costs, and positioning the product in a way that either you're not exploiting potential in the market or you're outpricing yourself because you're not understanding what you're trying to do, right?
Right. Identity
So
and
the
branding,
first,
right?
yeah, definitely. Like the thought process behind it is first, whatever you do, you've got to make sure that it delivers value and it returns value. A company exists to return positive shareholder value to whoever's invested in that company. So there is no tenable situation where you sell a product at loss. So that's the first thing to make sure you get out of the bat. So um, identifying, number one, the different market segments available, the different penetration strategies that you're going to implement, and the positioning of each product is going to be the core of the entire bread and butter of this situation. This entire structure is built on the brand strategy. So, what is the brand strategy for soil, seed, and water? At this point in time, it is an organic position. We're taking a differentiated position against market where a lot more technology has been implemented, innovative processes, efficient processes, uh, testing, quality control, all these things that Soil, Seed, and Water as an organization understands and has built across years of work, but has not yet brought that proposition to the market, right? So that's
Right.
what we
And
really want to do.
what we do in the market is we started at the large scale, so we sell to big
Yeah.
farmers, right? And my thought
Yes.
on that is that they're more discriminative or discriminate more than a consumer at home would. They it's life and death to them, and they're doing things at a large scale.
Yes.
So when we get the approval of them, that's pretty satisfying. But to talk to them, they want everything analysis, and we do the soil analysis, and we talk about the benefits, and we got to look at the logistics, and we have big messaging decks. So we have a lot of narrative and a lot of
Hmm.
time, and you can't do that when you're selling online. Ultimately, I think your consumers learn about you and learn about your brand and the integrity of what you're doing and the fact that we spend a lot of money on equipment and training and our facilities, and we're doing things at a scale that you just normally can't do with a small startup. But we're doing all those things. That's kind of the brand, but we can't really say that. We can't do that in a digital space like an Amazon. So ultimately, I think there's some word of mouth, and or they come back and they look at our websites, or they look at the work that we do and our nonprofit work, and kind of our history and our story. And I think eventually that brand, when the deeper they dive into who we are, the more I think they appreciate the brand and respect it and want to work with it.
And that's
You
one
know,
of the core strategies that we're building in acquisition of new customers, right? One of the key things that I implement, again, uh, another ethos that I operate by is manufacturer to consumer commerce. I believe that that's, again, one of the things that will lead the path of revenue generation in the new age. And by removing the middlemen, you get to deal directly with your consumers and learn about them and learn from them. And this is a core strategy that we will be implementing for Soil Seed and Water, because the structures that we create will enable your users to learn about you without you doing work. It's built in a digital format that it's consumed based on the user effort. So if I'm going to buy a bag of soil, or I'm going to buy an amendment from Soil, Sea, and Water, I'm going to go to the website, and the way that we build it is going to be such where the trust is there, the representation is there, the documentation is there, the research is there, As long as the user wants to learn more about it, we give it, and we give it with an open heart. So that conversion cycle then continuously replicates as we acquire a larger user base. And when you hit a population, a critical population of magnitude, then it really starts cycling, because then you get word of mouth as well, you get representation, you probably get a lot of organic content. But the key thing is to
Exactly.
structure the ecosystem in a way that enables this so that the flywheel begins. And that's
So,
really the
so part of that
core strategy.
process is I had to get accredited. The company had to get
Yes.
accredited. We went through that whole
Yep.
thing. We have to take the entire website and put it on a different platform that is
Yep.
usable.
So we're migrating the technology. Yes.
Right. And we're going to open up our sales relatively soon with the first, I don't know, half dozen products that are like
Mm-hmm.
what we consider kind of the key products, and then kind of go from there. So what we've done in the background is we've already gotten our products U.S. compost certified or OMRI certified. We've had to, we've a lot of our products we've had now for years that we've tested in the field, and we know they work. But that entire process, it's almost like that's a given. You have to have that done first, which is millions and millions of dollars and a lot of time. Then working with you, you get to that point where you're doing the thing, and then it just never ends either, right? There's always analysis every single week and month to see, and we need that feedback from the consumer to see, okay, is this really a product they want and like and tweak? So, walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so the ecosystems that we're going to operate in, of course, is leveraging on the Amazon ecosystem, which has a holistic fulfillment, marketing, brand positioning, B2B and B2C representation. So that's what a lot of people don't understand about Amazon. Most assume that it's just a B2C environment, but actually, they've been putting such significant work in building up the B2B portion as well.
So
So that opens up a
they'd be competing with like an Alibaba when they have that. Is that the idea? Because
to a
that's
certain extent, but they focused on the US market itself. So it's a US
oh,
for
okay.
US thing, which is much more vetted and is much more safer. And Amazon as a behemoth itself can cater to the logistics and fulfillment plus compliance requirements, because that's what Alibaba does not do. It does not give you compliance, and it does not give you that kind of level of security that an American organization that is compliant within the country can. You know,
Hmm.
so that's infrastructure that then allows a brand like us to scale without too much capital investment, because you want to get a distribution hub running. You're going to spend a couple of $100,000 at the very least, warehousing, manpower, space, storage racks,
Sure.
forklifts, and so on, right? So
Right. And there's a lot of things
using
on that infrastructure that you're talking about that Amazon has that takes
yes.
years to figure out. They have fees. They can store things. They can ship them or not or whatever. And there's a lot of different moving parts that any one of those
Yes.
things can really eat you alive too. If you're spending too much money on advertisement or the wrong advertisement, it's just money out the door, right? So it's a really tricky game that you got to play, right?
And it's a dynamic game as well, because it changes so often. Legislation on the ecosystem changes, competition comes in, legal issues across cross-border issues. All these things affect the regulations that Amazon then cascades down to its third-party sellers. So if you're not on the ball and you're not a practitioner, it's very difficult to fix a fixed strategy and follow that year on year. It's so dynamic, and it changes almost every month. There are things that they update, there are prices that change, and you need to truly understand how the business dynamics occur, from how much margin you have and how much Amazon takes, how much your consumer takes, what's your logistics component, marketing component, and have it really down pat, where you're operating within a single digit tolerance of error. That's
Yeah.
how efficient you need to be.
And our original concept was is that we would start walking first and just sell stuff on our own website, and then as we progress, go to the next. And I realized that that probably wouldn't work. I mean, we have a single website, a single point of focus that no one would ever see to speak of, and it would just take too long. And interesting enough, I met with another group, which is like one of the in my mind, they're like the gods of the industry. They've been around over 50 years and a great organic company, and they're decades ahead in so many different ways than what we do. They're, slightly different in their focus, but they tried to launch a retail line in, 7 or 8 years ago, and spent a lot of money, and I think just
Hmm.
kind of hit a dead end. And the problem with trying to do everything in house too is really difficult. So sometimes you just have to do the correct thing if you want to move forward. And the correct thing is using specialists like you to do that part of the marketing. We do our own internal marketing that you take and use, and that's part of that middle market that we talked about, that um, industry market, I should say, and the distributor market. And then we still are working directly with farmers. And again, that's a specialized thing too, and that's logistic because
Yes.
when we're dealing with a lot of granular or powder products, we're not we have solids, and a lot of farming these days has gone to liquids, especially at the large farm scale. So we're
Hmm.
we have a very specific niche that we're dealing with, but I can see a big company like them, and that was so they're, I don't know how much they're worth, but I would guess in the 100 million range. I mean, their facilities are amazing and
Yeah.
everything, but they had a product launch that I don't know if they'd consider it a failure, but they pulled back from it. So after 7 years, I would think that maybe that's that. But and you and I will be hopefully in discussions with them about how to relaunch that and maybe put it on our platform too, because again, their
Definitely.
products, they're different than ours. They're amazing products too, and that's what we're trying to do with the consumer, is provide anything that anyone in the agriculture spectrum could use to help them with what they're doing, whether it's minerals or organic based, compost based, whether it's liquid or dry, or if it's a foliar. These are all important tools to help people who are trying to grow stuff, right? And I
Yeah.
think that if you're a homeowner trying to buy stuff, it's a confusing world, and the products that are available at your fingertips, it's really, really, really hard to understand which one does what. And most of the stuff that I would say that you would see in box stores is inferior product lines. That's my personal
Hmm.
belief, and/or they're too generic in some ways for what they're doing. But that's part of it. So again, you're we've gotten up to a certain point with what you're doing, and then, but there's continue. Talk about how these processes continue throughout the life cycle of what you're doing.
Yeah, so the digital ecosystem is a community. It is a journey in growth across a number of parameters where you're looking to increase many different kinds of parameters. First is the number of users, the number of active buyers for your products. Second is product range. Third is probably cart value, how much a person spends. Customer lifetime value is another parameter you look at because that would indicate how loyal a customer base you're having across time. That should grow as you introduce a different range, a different formula, a different size, a different batch. And the great thing about what we're doing is that we're getting the basics done correctly by number one, having compliance sorted out, number two, brand protection. So we recently secured Amazon's brand registration, and that's a big deal because then we can protect the brand that we're building on Amazon, which is more or less an essential component of any investment, right? You want to protect your investment. So
Sure.
those compliance setup and also the work that yourself and the team has done for the past 4 years, right? OMRI certification, all the laboratory tests, the product quality, the improvement and documentation of the internal processes that lead to a quality product. Because in the end, that's what also really matters, right? What are we selling to the consumer? This is the gold standard. If not, that's the best that you can get in the market. Definitely the best that we can do with the technology and the innovation that you and your team have pulled off. So, growing this is a journey of keeping it consistent, excellence in execution, making sure the customer perception is maintained while we deliver what we promised. So, if you say this is 9 pounds of product, it's going to be 9 pounds of product. If you buy the brand, this is your representation of the brand. When a person interacts with it and they trust it and they have a good experience, they tend to be able to buy other products in the same range as well. And that's the experience we want to perpetuate. Now, we're going to have a content strategy to disseminate the values of the brand as well, in terms of videos, pictures, articles. Hey, even this podcast, probably, who knows?
Sure.
Um, and these things build the trust factor. So when you talk about building a brand, it's not just, hey, how much product can I sell? Hey, I want to push X number of items and I want to expand the range. No, it's about the customer journey and what the brand represents. Because the brand's potential is unlimited. We can produce all sorts of different product ranges as long as we have that super population of, I would say, your raving customers, which, anytime Soil Seed and Water comes out with a product, they'll be like, I'm ready for that because I trust the brand and they do good stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's
keeping that consistent is going to be core.
interesting because it just brought back a couple of memories. I had almost 20 years ago now, not quite, had a disruption industry. I had a VoIP phone company that was kind of
Hmm.
cutting edge. We were before the Apple phone. We had a lot of the components, like FaceTime and things like that. We had classified features. So I had a systems engineer, and I'm gonna try to get him. I'll call him and see if he wants to get on a podcast with you, because now I think he's one of the creative developers over at Amazon. So I'd be kind of curious
Ah,
to see his perspective. Really bright guy, and we entered that market, and it was the same thing. It's a technology thing, and technology changes so fast, and all the different things we were working on were changing like in real time. So I definitely want to try to contact him. I haven't talked to him in probably 4 or 5 years, and see how he's doing. But he'd be another great guy to have on with you, talking with about
perfect.
stuff that most people who are listening, including me, don't really know. We don't live in that space. But talk about, because that was when I did that. That was way before COVID. I mean, that
Mhm.
was more than 10 years before COVID, and we were international. We had an office in Taipei, and we were getting all our plug and play products and from there, and we had software from Canada, and but we put together a pretty cool thing. But it required tremendous amounts of money, and there was a barrier to entry on that industry. But the I guess the segue to that would be, back then. That's way before. But I remember reading early on how people are going to start buying online more and more. And I can't remember in '06 what that, 10%, 15% of the population was buying online. I didn't
Mhm.
really do it. I didn't know what PayPal or Apple Pay or any of those things. Some of those things didn't exist, but I didn't trust my credit card. And there's, even today, there's so many scammers
Yeah.
that there's that level of trust. But the world kind of changed, right? You changed with different programs like Airbnb. Who would ever think that you'd go and stay in somebody's spare bedroom, and feel safe about it, or they'd feel safe about you, or getting in somebody's car and driving, like you would in an Uber these days. I mean, there's so many different things that pivoted in these last 10 years, but one of them is that drive to commerce that is digital. It's convenient and
Mhm.
now it's perceived as safe. So what happened? What happened before, and what I guess what this is something maybe that good came out of COVID, right? Is that new level of trust. We all use Zoom now. You're basically, this isn't Zoom, but it's a similar thing where we are talking,
Mhm.
on a phone to, when we're on the other side of the planet from each other, and it's commonplace. And I can tell you, it wasn't. We had systems that allowed you to do that with our VoIP software that were cutting edge at the time. And other than that, people were picking up a landline phone to talk to each other. It was the early days of cell phones and stuff. So, what? Tell me about that progression that really has just happened. But it's happened over 20 years probably, but these last 5 years.
So yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a very exciting point in our lives, in the lives of whichever generation is alive and active, whether the early young guys, the middle aged guys, or the more older guys as well. The world has changed. The pandemic has forced e-commerce to grow at a rate that was equal to, in 1 year it grew at the rate that it was for a total of the previous 10 years in that scale. So it just boomed crazily. And there's a few factors that caused this, right? First, number one is the disruption of the movement of people, right? When the pandemic happened, lockdowns were going on, people were fearful of seeing each other face to face, and that caused them to, number one, either stay in their homes or risk getting sick. And what actually overcame or helped to provide distribution in that time when people were not moving was infrastructure of e-commerce, right? In Malaysia, we're a much smaller country. Our population is about 30 million people. Land space is smaller than, I think, half a state of the US. But we had a similar digital infrastructure. And during the pandemic, where lockdowns were happening, these digital companies were allowed to operate and deemed as essential. And I truly believe, because I was looking very closely at US as well, because that's my main market. Amazon provided the backbone of infrastructure for the US to keep itself operating during a time where all systems were collapsing. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, you will see that those who were skeptical about these systems, about security issues, about credit cards and all that, they had no choice. They were forced to go on to these digital platforms, whether it's Amazon or eBay or Etsy or whatever, not to get the essentials, and sometimes more often than not to get the non-essentials to keep them sane while they're locked down at home. Now, this caused a shift in the demographics of these platforms, because now suddenly you get an influx of cash rich, skeptical older people who have the buying power and are pretty bored. And that literally turned the entire ecosystem upside down. And this was in 2021, where I think every e-commerce platform just went skyrocketing in terms of sales and transactions and volumes and all these things. And the worst part was the logistics players. They were pushed to the brink of operational capacity, and a lot of them actually could not handle it. So this shift after the pandemic, it did not go away, because then suddenly you get this quick fire way of building trust in the older population, and their population retained. It didn't go anywhere. So now, because of this shift, the platform has a lot more active users, a lot more markets that you can reach, and now as brand owners, we get to access that population through the platform if you have a strong ability to execute on said platforms, right? So now the
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem has shifted. Although, having said that, I think we're still in the recovery period post pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of government money has been going out to support and to keep things alive, and that has stopped. So right now, businesses are not in a great place. Cash flow is suffering. Maybe there is a recovery period going on right now, but it's not where it was before. So consumer spend drops in terms of card value, and also they're not spending so much on non-essentials and the higher end goods. They're keeping it towards more of the basics. So if you're in that category of products, you're doing fine. But if you're in the high level luxury goods segment, then it's seen to be about 30% drop. So those are kind of some of the trends that I've seen
for now.
happening on platform itself.
Okay, yeah, so they're entering normal business cycles, even though they're digital, and we
Mm.
never have watched digital business cycles for decades. But now they're
Mhm.
entering the real world of regular business cycles, and so things get vetted. One of the things that you and I talked about was before COVID, you would need to reach out to your client base a dozen times a year, perhaps, right? And
Mhm.
now that's changed because there's so much information on the market, so much marketing, so much of that. Tell me about that a little bit. And that's a strategy. Then now you have to be there for your market, for your clients, right?
Yeah, the democratization of attention is what the digital economy has brought to the forefront of the market, right? So now no longer is the large mass market being limited to just the big players who can pay for the billboards, who can pay for the TV ads and all those other mass media. Facebook, Google have now created a system which you can start marketing for a couple of dollars a day, and that's now well within the reach of small businesses. The issue is that the thought process behind the marketing is still high level. You've got to understand human psychology. You've got to understand what brand means. How do people consume? And in this day and stage of recent papers that I've read, it can take up to 34 points of contact before a consumer converts. So
Almost
he's going to
triple.
need to meet your brand 34 times before he decides to give you his money. Because number
Sure.
one, everyone's vying for his attention, right? Number two, he's not ready to spend when you talk to him. He's probably doing something else, yeah, but he interacts with your brand. He sees, okay, I'm going to consider you. And do you make an impact? And that's where advertising, strategy, marketing, graphics, and all these other elements come into play to make their experience of your brand memorable and something that they would seek to go. And now, even further than that, what we see with the new generation is that it is consumption based on principle, where if you're not principally aligned with them, they will not spend their dollar on your brand. So this is something that brands need to now take into consideration, especially when they come from a large mass scale manufacturer that usually does not take this into account, right? So the new
Right.
consumers, this is important for them. So we got to
S-
look at that.
So it's interesting because that is really a brand new emerging industry. And if you really think about this, if you had gone to school 20 years ago for software engineering or marketing or whatever, you could have gotten into the industry, but you would not have learned any of the things you need to know, the skill sets you need to know now. So you entered with your own business. You had to learn things. You were already educated. You were a bright guy, and you were working in biomedical engineering and that kind of thing. But truthfully, it was you had to learn on the spot with everyone else in the industry, and it's interesting because the last time I talked to my friend about Amazon is they launch things just in time, and years ago they used to do customer profiling and studies and all this and they do test trials and that kind of thing. Now, if they got an idea, they launch it, and if it works, it works, and if it or they need to tweak it, they tweak it, and if that puts a lot of pressure on the creative process and also on your operational process. And I'm looking at kind of that industry for agriculture was going through similar pains, right? So I didn't. I think we all kind of learned a lot during the COVID pandemic, even though it wasn't as severe, I think, as that we were afraid it was going to be. Um, what ended up happening early on is restaurants all closed. And I didn't realize it, but I think I read a statistics that said 25% of the food eaten in the U.S. is eaten at a restaurant. And wow, that's a lot. I remember as a kid, my parents would take me to a restaurant once a year for my birthday, and usually I was in trouble, so they didn't even do that. So the idea that 25% of the time you're eating at a restaurant was crazy to me, but it devastated the restaurant industry, and I'm sure they're still recovering, and some had to learn new ways of surviving and that kind of thing. But then that affected distribution. If you think about it, farmers no longer, some of them were specialized because they were selling organics or whatever to good restaurants, and now all of a sudden, your customer's not there. So,
Demand
you
just
know,
went away.
farmers started plowing crops into the fields, and we
Yeah.
pivoted with our nonprofit, Urban Farming Education. We pivoted and we were doing food distributions because there were people actually that were in trouble. Families that up until then worked. Mom and dad both worked in a restaurant or something. Something similar to that, and now they're unemployed. So they got bills to pay, they got to feed the kids and that kind of thing. So I think for a short period of time, what we did was helping people and that kind of thing. And it's interesting because you talk about resilient phone systems, or not phone system, but food systems, right? And you kind of learned, where some of these points are, and we could be a crisis or two away from having major breakdowns again. So every once in a while, something
Yes.
like that, at least there's a learning curve that you go through, and it spikes pretty high as we're going through it. But I want to kind of wrap up here pretty soon. We're going to be doing a series with you, and now that I just realized it, I'll see if my friend wants to jump in on one of the podcasts. But we're going to try to follow the process that we're going through with Soil, Seed, and Water, getting online and marketing, and some of the new brands and some of the joint venture things that we're doing with not just Fishnure, but with some other people, to create what I think is going to be one of the best online organic brands for people who grow things, and you're going to be a big part of it. So I'll kind of wrap up this by saying thank you for joining me today. It was a great start to our dialogue, and we'll probably have a couple more of these with you over this next year. And have a great. I don't know what time of day it is in Malaysia, and you're in the
It's
middle of the night, and I'm in the middle of the day. So, but we're used to it. It seems like every
yeah.
time I
I
talk
mean,
to you.
it's something that I'm used to as well, working with brands from around the world as well. So it's almost 4 in the morning here,
Okay.
and again, really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.